Hello, and welcome to our second event in the New 21 Culture Can't Be Fixed series. Today, we're going to delve deeper into hierarchy. Shmierarchy is the title. So thank you all for watching. I would like to begin, as we always do here at New 21, with our acknowledgement to country. And I want to acknowledge that Indigenous custodians and Indigenous communities have been custodians of our lands globally for millennia. And this care, advocating for people, for place, and for planet is something that, is really important in terms of these unbreakable links between our past and determining our future. And I'm dialing in from Melbourne, from Naarm. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I think I look away because I think, but I guess what I wanted to, lead with the context of this acknowledgement is it's one of culture. This series that we're bringing to you is all about culture can't be fixed. And sure, it's a bit of a cheeky title because we're really talking about the levers around that actually can, get us closer to the cultures we want to create, the cultures that at New 21 we believe make work better for a new world. So thinking about culture, thinking about our Indigenous communities and our connection to the land, that's the context in which I want to acknowledge today and bring us into this space. So my name's Hannah. I'm one of the New 21 crew, and New 21, we're an organisation dedicated to making work better for a new world. And what that means for us, or how we do that, is through our consulting studio, and that's where we work around ways of working, transformation, change, innovation, leadership, and product and service design. And then we've also got our product studio, and that's creating products not only for us to launch into the market, but to help our customers as well. So you could say we've got a lot of experience in assessing and helping and being very, very practical with many clients, customers, friends that we work with all over the world, actually. And, there's things that we really want to do better, and we really want to help people do better. And that's, I guess, the better work for a new world. We want to create like these humming, thriving, adaptable, unstoppable organizations. Because probably a lot of us at New 21 have got the battle scars of what we don't want to have part of. I can see Katia nodding there. So that's it's good. So I'm going to hand over to Eduardo and Katia, who are two of just beautiful human beings, very, very clever. And I'm very proud to call them my friends and colleagues and business partners. We do some pretty damn cool shit. So I'm going to hand over to Eduardo and Katia, who are going to lead us through hierarchy, shmierarchy. We're going to do an in-conversation style. So the two of them are going to have a really beautiful conversation. What we would love is for any questions that arise for you to pop them on the chat, because I'll reappear a couple of times throughout the hour to facilitate a bit of a Q&A with Eduardo and Katia. So over to you, gang.
Awesome. Thanks, G. Morning, Eduardo.
Thank you, Hannah. Good morning. Do we still have Hannah sort of in the middle, or Lucas? Or is it Katia and I now? The spotlight thing, there you go. That's what I meant. Hey, Katia.
Hey, how you going? I feel like we're in the Brady Bunch. You should be looking up and I should be looking down.
Well, we wanted to do this a little bit different. On the first series, I was on the couch with Shan, and we were able to be together rather than sort of this Zoom card. But unfortunately, you couldn't fly from Sydney to Melbourne today to be with me, and we have to do it this way. But I think we can still make it work. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think if nothing else, Eduardo, at least, we adapt. And I always remember actually when we went into COVID, how everything that we ran face-to-face overnight, we had to run virtually.
Yeah. So we're still both sitting in a couch. I'm sitting on a couch. You're sitting on a couch as well. Yeah.
I'm sitting on a couch in my place. I'm actually zooming in from Sydney, which is in the Gadigal country of the Eora Nation. Where are you coming from?
I'm in Melbourne as well. I mean,
Yeah.
yes. Did you come up with this title, Hierarchy Shmierarchy? Because I don't even know what Shmierarchy means. Did you come up with this?
I think Sean and I, when we were talking about it, it was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek way of going, so much of organizations, the way that they're set up is through hierarchy, and the way people do sense making of an organization is through hierarchy. And it was just a little bit of tongue-in-cheek going, it's crazy. It's crazy, Do you know the history of hierarchy?
No.
Do you mind if I nerd you out a little bit? Cool.
Go for it. Go for it. Go for it.
Actually, the word itself means governance of sacred things, governance of sacred things. And it goes back to the 6th century. So it's got a long, long history, and it was around priests and angels and stuff back in the 6th century. But if we fast forward to say the 1800s, it was around the mid-1800s where hierarchy really came into its own in a business sense in the Great Western Railway. A guy by the name Brunel actually created the first schematic of the organization, because it was a huge project, and he drew it. And if you actually look it up, it looks like this incredible picture. It looks like a mandala. It's beautiful. And it was his way of trying to take this massive project and make sense of it, make sense of who's talking to who's working with who. If we fast forward then into the 1900s, Henry Ford was, and everyone knows Henry Ford from the Industrial Revolution, he was renowned for splitting the thinkers and the doers. And that's where hierarchy really became around the managers and the doers, and started to use boxes and lines for who's doing what, who's speaking to who, and how does it all work. And when I think of it, I kind of go, it hasn't changed that much. When you look at that first schematic in the 1800s, it actually hasn't changed.
That I did know. I saw a picture of a org chart from 1870 or something like that, 1890. And one from today, they look exactly the same, yeah?
Can you think of anything in your life, Eduardo, in our short time? So you were talking mid-1800s to now is 200 years ago. Yeah. And yet, can you think of anything in your life in the last 50 years that has stayed the same?
Probably not, no.
You think of fashion, you think of technology, even I always laugh at this one, think of the nomenclature of role titles in organizations. We've gone from human resources into people and culture. Even that's changed. And yet there's something quite intractable, I can never say that word, around hierarchy and organizational structures. Right. I wonder what that might be.
No idea. But I'm sure we're going to explore it, yeah? As Hannah was saying, so this series is called Culture Can Be Fixed, and it's a little bit of we look at what are the actual elements in organizations that affect culture. And when we talk about organizational design, many people think about organizational structure. Yeah, it's the first thing that people think about when we talk about organizational design. It's how we structure, and it's the thing maybe that always gets touched or criticized or changed every year, right? So how organizational structure hinders agility, hinders innovation, so we're going to look at all that.
Amazing.
So you just mentioned that old structures haven't changed in 150 or 170 years. So you still have the same, someone on the top and the box is coming down and then more people. So I think the only innovation that I can think of in terms of org structures that have happened in the last 100 years or since then is the famous Spotify model
Yeah.
that came up in 2012, right? So this is Spotify, the music stream organization. They were famous because they came up with a model of structuring themselves, which rather than being in functional silos, what they did, they came up with way of structuring cross-functional teams with the customer in mind. Now they became famous because they changed also the name. So they called those cross-functional teams, they call them squads. And those squads form part of a tribe. And then you had chapters, I think it was. Chapters is the same people that perform the same role, for example, developers or, but in different squads. So that became a chapter. And then they had guilds as well. Yeah. So this was 2012. And if you work for a large organization, you probably have had a bunch of consultants in the last 10 years coming and telling you that you need to change your role and you're not a marketing manager anymore. And what you are now is a squad lead or a tribe guru or something like that. And, everybody's trying to adopt this new structure. But in my mind, I mean, it has merits because it has, the customer in mind and cross-functional teams. But in my mind, organizations are trying to do the same thing that we were trying to do with the functional boxes, but with project-based, right? So a project before was like a bunch of people coming together from different departments. It's like, we're going to do something. We're going to get together. We're going to be great. Yeah. All right, let's standardize that Spotify model. Yeah. We bring people from all different departments. We put them together and we call them squads or tribes or guilds or whatever they want to call it. But it's the same thing, right? Like we're still putting concrete into something, and we're hoping that this is gonna just magically be the most effective way to run a business. Is that I don't know. What do you?
I absolutely agree. And what was going through my mind, Eduardo, is what is the psychological need, do you think, that is trying to solve? Why do you think we do that as humans? Why do we put those sorts of structures in place?
I think
what are we trying to avoid?
Pardon?
What are we trying to avoid?
I think there's two things, and we probably will delve more into it, but there's two things. One, at organizational level, we deal very badly with the lack of ambiguity, right? So with ambiguity, right? And then we want to make sure that everything is, put in boxes and we've got a structure, and, that's probably at organizational level what I think what's going on.
Yeah.
Then there's another part of personal level, which we'll go maybe later, which is about the sense of identity we get, from our roles and all that. But I think that's probably the two reasons that come to my mind.
I totally agree. And I'm going to nerd out a bit again, but when I think of an organization and, the notion of putting that sort of structure around it, I always think of an analogy between traffic lights and roundabouts. And let me kind of just explain that a bit. I suppose you and I both know that there are two primary sorts of systems and that an organization is a system, right? And there's a complicated system and there's a complex system. Now, a complicated system, as you and I both know, it might be an engine, might be a watch. It's something that's made up of a lot of different parts, but essentially we know how it works. And if we have to change something or we have to repair something because it stopped working, we actually know how to do that. I'm assuming that's the same for your car. Sometimes it's not the same for my car, but that might be its age. Then we talk about complicated systems. Now, humans are complicated. Complex. Complex. And so is the weather. Although Dubai might say something differently. They were obviously trying to make it rain and it did, but probably slightly more than they hoped. But ultimately, you can't control something that's complex. It's got an uncontrollable element to it, which means there's a randomness to it. Then I go back to kind of traffic lights and roundabouts and go, a traffic light is a controlled system. It's trying to take a bunch of humans that sitting behind a car with no controls might be lethal. So they try and put those controls in place. It's clear signals of green means go, red means stop. And just to make sure we're really clear, let's do an amber so that you know that you're going in, you know you're going to be asked to stop in a minute. That's a complicated way or a complicated system. Then you look at roundabouts. Roundabouts are ultimately provide a level of autonomy, a level of trust. It has high throughput, and it's designed around two principles. One being go with the flow, and the other being give way to the right. So you've got a complicated system and a complex way of managing things with the roundabout. Now the org structure. The org structure is the traffic lights, right? The structure in its current form, when we think about how, a traditional org structure, it's really around how we organize who you speak to, who's going to make the decisions around the work that you do, how is the communication flows going to happen, and what is it that we're trying to achieve? Does that really work in this day and age? It did maybe back in Henry Ford's day, because it was a very simple world. But when you think about the way that we operate today, it needs to be more like a roundabout, right? Which is based on an element of principles and guidance.
Yeah. So what comes to my mind when you talk about roundabouts and traffic lights? So traffic lights almost you switched off. You switched off your brain. You don't have to think, right? Like red, I have to stop. Green, I have to go. With a roundabout, your brain is switched on. You need to see who's coming to the left, who's coming from the right. Do I go? Do I let him go? Your brain is switched on, which I think is what happens when we try to put so much control in organizations, right? Then people start switching off their brains.
Totally agree.
Just waiting for the process or the structure or, waiting for someone. But, if you don't have that structure, when people start switching their brains on.
Yeah.
And then traffic starts to flow in your example, right? Right. I think so. How many times have we been in organizations that every year they go, something's not wrong, so therefore we need to change the structure, right? And we go into a restructure and we're changing either from functional to, to project-based, or from regional to, sort of headquarters. There's a change of structure, and it almost like stops the organization for 3 months when all that happened. Like
absolutely,
we can't do anything until that structure is done. Yeah, it's like we put some control. Gus, our business partners, he said, you put concrete. Yeah, you put concrete, and then you put concrete over concrete. Yeah, and every year the whole organization stops. I don't know if you live that as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my history that I worked in, Australia's biggest airline. We won't mention names, but and it was very much like that. Every 3 months or 4 months, we would go through a restructure. You would have to stop everything you were doing, reorganize your work,
apply for roles, people anxiety. Am I going to have a role here? Are they going to change? What does it mean for me? Yeah.
That's right. And I'm working with a client at the moment where we're not yet restructuring, although we will, I'm sure, but we're supporting them to get that flow of information far more fluidly, because at the moment, everything has to go up and you have to wait for it to go up. And then you have to come back down again, and you have to wait for it to come back down, and then we can take action. And no sooner are you taking action than something else in the system has changed and it needs to go back up. Imagine how slow that is.
So when we go back to the meaning of this series, right? So culture can be fixed. We know culture can be fixed. It's the elements of the system of work. right? So org structure is one of the elements.
Absolutely.
How much that the way people structure or see org structures affect the culture? Enormously, right?
Oh, hugely. And it's interesting, you know, again, I'm always observing behavior.
Mm.
And I know that we've got our own example within U21, but if I just for a moment, because I've been so entrenched with a client recently, I've created a very fluid structure in one of the teams that I've set up.
Mm.
But the mental model that people come to that structure is still one based on hierarchy.
Mm. Well, it's 150 years of history, I guess.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. So not a judgment, but it just goes to show that alongside creating fluid structures and more more autonomous ways of working, we need to also be coaching and speaking at an individual level around the mental models that people are bringing
Right.
to their ways of working.
So you talk about fluid structures. I talk about fluid structures as well. So when people ask me, okay, well, what's the solution? If we're saying that, a rigid structure and a rigid structure that changes every 12 months, is not the solution and is impacting the culture of an organization. People ask me, what is the solution? And then I say, continuous fluid structures. Continuous fluid structures, and people say, okay, well, what does that mean, right? And I was writing a blog this week about trying to explain this.
I love that blog.
And something came to my mind in terms of explaining this, and I don't know if many people have watched the series of Ted Lasso, but if not, I'll explain very quickly. So Ted Lasso is an American football coach that goes to England and coaches a soccer team in England, but he has no idea of soccer. But through coaching his team, and he does well at the end. But there's one episode when in season 2, I think, when he's in Amsterdam, and I can't remember if he takes drugs or not. I can't remember, but he's dreaming about a system for his team. A structure for his team, and he's dreaming, or he's hallucinating almost, and he dreams of this system that almost every player can play in every player position, right?
Yeah.
And what he didn't know is that system already existed, and it was from the 70s, and it was the Dutch national team, and it was called total football. Total football, and it was based in 4 things, and I wrote this down. I don't want to butcher this, but it was based on conditioning.
Yeah.
It was based on versatility, awareness, and belief. Right. So for this system to work, where every player pretty much can take another player's position, you needed those 4 things. And then I reflected, said, how can you bring that back to our corporate world, right?
Yeah.
And I thought conditioning, which in soccer is how fit you are, could be the experience or skills that you bring. The more experience, the more skills that you bring means you're conditioning. Yes. Conditioning, versatility, awareness, and belief, right? So conditioning is the skills and experience that you bring.
Yeah.
Versatility is what a lot of organizations call now being T-shape. I don't know if you probably have heard it.
Definitely heard that. Yeah.
So T-shape is that you have like a deep expertise in something, like marketing or product, whatever, but that's sort of the vertical part of the T. And then you've got the horizontal part of the T, which is about you're good at collaborating with other departments. You can even perform some of the other roles. So you're a versatile type of employee. Awareness is about understanding what everyone is doing. So you need to know, in the soccer field, you need to know what the other 10 players are doing, right? So you can take. So I guess in the corporate world is about knowing what everyone's working on. So those visibility, we talk about it in the first event about, you know, the prioritization, the visibility, continuous prioritization of work. So everyone knows what everyone's working. And the last one is belief. Like if you have little or, you know, self-belief, this is not going to work. But if you know, believe in yourself, and I guess we'll go into that in a minute, you know, the ego doesn't get in the way, and you're happy to take any position or any time, then that's going to work. I don't know. I thought it was a pretty good analogy. I don't know, what do you think?
I think it's an awesome analogy, because ultimately you're not trying to, you know, it's an overlay, right? It is.
Sorry, Hannah just gave me, I don't know what we've done. Have we bored everyone with Ted Lasso?
Yeah.
No, Ted Lasso is awesome. So many life lessons and business lessons from our friend Ted Lasso. No, I wanted to, and Katia, you could have kept going. It was beautiful. But I guess what I wanted to just jump in and throw at you both is a question that's come through actually, which is, how might these fluid structures in our large business, where structure is perceived as, so how might we have these fluid structures when they're perceived as the thing that's holding us together? So what is like some of the practical?
Yeah.
Where do we start?
Ooh.
The first thing I'll say, that you call it perceive,
Yeah.
holding us together, right? Well, that's exactly right. It's perceived. I think it's a false sense of control. You know, when every year we go through a restructure, we put people in boxes and we say, okay, we've got it. You know, this is what's going to be perfect for the next, you know, 2 or 3 years, and the work's going to flow beautifully from one end to the other of the organization, and everyone's going to be happy. It's a false sense of control, right? So you were talking about, Katya, about the principles of autonomy and
Trust.
and trust. Right? So maybe we explain how we make it work ourselves, Hannah, and then people can extrapolate how they can make it work in their organization. Yeah.
Like really practical stuff would be epic, because I know people are like,
Yeah.
I knew 21, but how?
Yeah. So, you know, we're a relatively small organization. We're about 30 something, but, you know, in our case, we don't have job titles, for example, and we'll go into that in a minute. And what we do is every 3 months, I think we explained that last event, we decide the work that needs to be done. And then we form teams based on the work, not on hierarchy, not on job titles, based on the work, based on availability. You know, like if I think about it, you know, going back to the example of the Ted Lasso, we all bring different experiences, you know, skills. So Katya, you're an expert in org design, you're an expert in change. So when a client comes and they need that, you know, you're going to come and probably lead that project, right? But there'll be other people, going back to the versatility, that want to shadow you, you know, want to learn. That's how we start adding more skills, you know, and adding that versatility. Then, you know, we decide on the work we want to do internally, you know, in terms of people or marketing or growth. And then we form teams every 3 months. And we all definitely work on our self-belief, right? So I think this is how you bring, I don't know, I feel I'm talking too much, Katya.
No, not at all. I love what you were saying. And as you were talking, I was reflecting of my own journey coming out of a huge corporate where I'd spent a lot, you know, many years. So that was my backdrop. And I really understand why people are grappling with, tell us how. And in some ways, the how will be different according to the context, right? And I know that in large organizations, when I think of the clients that I'm working with at the moment, I would say what you've just said, Eduardo, you need to take that example and then make it small and test and learn, which is kind of what I'm doing in a large healthcare client at the moment. I can't change the entire system. I'm not going to change the board. I'm not going to change everyone overnight, but what I can do is start to look at it through a paradigm of what does great look like? Great looks like the Ted Lasso example.
Mhm.
Where are we today? Well, we're stuck in boxes and lines, and I'm in my team is change management, so therefore their role is this size and they have to work with this person. And then and then what's the next best step? Well, so for me in that scenario, the next best step was, how do I create my team and the way that they approach work and do the work in a way that's more fluid. So in a way where I'm building their self-belief, I'm building versatility amongst the roles. So whilst I've got 3 different role types in that team, each one of those team members is starting to learn how to step into the person above's role. Because the world is so fluid that if I just left this group doing their job until they got promoted into this role, I can tell you now what would happen. I would have this group doing nothing, probably for a few months, and I'd be asked, why have I got so many resources doing nothing? And these people being overworked, and they're about to burn out. So it is, it's not an easy question to answer as to how you apply it, but that said, it's the principles that you apply.
That's
and
right.
that you're applying them to.
We always talk about the 3 levels: mindset, principles, and practices with everything we do. Mindset, how we think about it. Principles is about, it's like, what are the principles you apply? Practice is how you actually do it, right? If you start with a mindset, I want to have some sort of, structures that allow people to do the right work at the right time, by the right team. Yeah. Then what are the principles that you can apply? And then what are the practices, how you do it? As you said, it's going to be different in every context. Of course, if you have like 1,000 people organization, it will require a lot of thinking how to do that. But I think it's about thinking about the organization as systems. So what systems can operate, sort of on their own, try that, and then how those systems connect to each other. Like, it's not, I understand, it's not an easy, it's much simple to say, okay, well, this is an org chart and this is how we're going to work. Rather than, well, depending on the work, depending how priorities change, all that. I understand it's hard, but I believe that if organizations had the right mindset and set the right principles, it could be achieved.
Yeah, and as you were talking then, I guess the other, and you sort of just alluded to it, the how will also depend on where your organization is at.
Yeah.
So when I think about, the theory of change, I'm going to go nerdy again, but the trans-theoretical model of change, if you are in pre-contemplation, it means you don't even think there's a problem. If that's where your organization is, then you have to demonstrate little small explorations and testing learn to show them what's new. If your organization, however, is calling out, like maybe Spotify's was, let's do this differently. Let's work out how we do this differently. And I saw this at Qantas, actually. There was the loyalty component of the business wanted to work differently. And they did. They completely restructured. They structured.
That's a system in itself, right?
Right, the system within itself. Now, it wasn't without its challenges, and it came up against, because the funding came out of the airline, it definitely had its shortfalls.
The money.
But it still worked as its own system.
Yeah.
And people were lining up at the door wanting to work for them because of that notion of trust and autonomy in the way and what they worked on.
So let's touch on the individual, because we talk about the, I guess, the constraints at the organizational level, which in my mind mainly is that dealing badly with ambiguity. But then there's the individual, that what we all bring, and I think that's a big one.
Yes.
Which is to me is the sense of identity we give ourselves to our roles, right? And I'm going to use you as an example, Katia. I hope you don't mind, but
Okay.
Katia,
I'm used to being your example. I'm your muse.
Katia mentioned she worked for Qantas. I think you've said it already.
I said it. Sorry, slipped out.
For how long?
23 years.
Do you work for Qantas for
And
20?
I owe it a debt, I love, it was an awesome company.
Beautiful.
It was an awesome company.
So you've worked for Qantas for 23 years, and then for Need21 for how long?
5 years now.
5 years now, right? That's a big change, right?
Huge, huge. The thinking I did to jump ship.
And I remember you, a couple of years ago, you were saying, I love working for Need21. I love the work we do. I have this autonomy, this trust, this purpose, right? Which is beautiful. I said, but I can't stop myself, from looking, when I look on LinkedIn, for example, all my previous colleagues, every 6 months, they change their roles to some senior something, and I've been 5 years in this organization and I haven't changed my role because we don't have roles, right? So you can't change them. So you don't get that dopamine of the 5 minutes dopamine of, I'm going on LinkedIn and I'm going to put that I've got a new title, and probably they give me $10,000 more for that title.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And these 5 minutes of glory. But then maybe, the job satisfaction is not as, but even for you that you've seen both sides, you still struggle with that, or you did, recognize that there was a sense of identity about, well, who am I? I don't have a job title.
Yes.
I'm not getting promotions every 2 years.
Yes.
How does that make me feel?
So, yeah, and spot on. And I grappled with it for a while, right? Like, not because... So anyone that goes onto my LinkedIn, just so you know, it'll say, I think it may even say head of change at Ramsay. Now, just to be really clear, the reason why that is on there is because Ramsay asked me to do that. And not because I'm doing it for my own self. It was because I'm working with a lot of different vendors and they needed to know that what my role was.
Yeah.
But the truth of it was letting go of the role was actually really freeing. It took a while to get my head around because I knew my identity to be through, I've worked really hard to get where I am, right? And so letting go of the title kind of felt like I was, well, hang on a second. If I've worked really hard to get to that level, why am I letting go of the title? But
Box.
It's a box. It's a box. And the box is, it's entrapment in so many different ways. I look at my growth at Need21 without the title, and it's been exponential. So really then what does, and my pay has grown. So it's not, it's almost like I kept myself in the box with the title, and I could let the box go. I used the eraser, I rubbed out the box and went, I'm Katya, here's what I do, here's what I know, and I work for Need21, and yeah, it's freeing.
Because I think for this to work, for these continuous fluid structures we're talking about, like you need the design and design the system in a way, as we're talking about, but you need those people as well to be okay with that, to be okay with not having a job title. I mean, I'm not saying don't have a job title. Can I finish that thought? Yeah. I'm not saying don't have a job title, but like don't be
wedded to it,
constrained by it, right? You need those people that are okay with that, and then don't see this sense of identity to link to that title or the next promotion. Someone was asking me, then how do you do it, right? Like, well, you claim your role in an organization like that. You claim your role. You start, I can do that. I'm good at that. Is the work that leads where you go rather than the boxes and the structure.
That's right.
That's right. Hannah, I can't see the comments. Are people telling that we're full of...
Sure, that's my job. There's there's some really interesting, there's a few themes emerging. So I'll collate a few into one question, but there's a beautiful question here from Jackie for you, Katya. What supported that individual evolution in you to move beyond that box? that would be helpful to understand? What did the organization do to support that in you?
Yeah, great question, Jackie. So at New 21 particularly, we are a developmental organization, and essentially what that means is that we have coaches. So, and these aren't, you know, professional coaches out there. These are my peers and my colleagues within New 21 that I have a relationship on a one-on-one basis, and they will help develop me. So when I've got something going on that's bugging me, whether it's the title, and I think, Eduardo, at that stage, it was you and I were having lots of robust discussions. You encouraged me to really look at, well, what does that title mean for you? What is it? Oh, hey, Neo. Sorry, love dogs.
For those that are joining again, you get to see him again.
Beautiful.
So the organization supported me with coaching. It also supported me in my own learning journey. So it never constrained what I worked on. So if my title was, yeah, but I should be head of this department, Eduardo would come back to me and say, what do you want to be? What do you want to do in this organization? What area of work do you want to contribute to? And so it opened up the question and put the ownership and accountability back to myself as to what would I like to create, which was, at first incredibly daunting. But I have such huge trust and love with my colleagues that I'm able to face into that. I hope that answers the question for you.
Is the fourth tenet of that Ted Lasso example that I was conditioning, versatility, awareness, and belief.
Yes.
But you need that belief. You need to be working on that belief. Yeah, that he did in the series by, sort of coaching each player and all that. And we've got a structure to do that in Need 21. But yeah, everyone needs to be actively working on that self-belief versus ego.
That's it.
And then you get the organizational gain versus sort of the personal gain. What are we talking about? I understand it's complex, and doing it at scale is very, very complex, but we need to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Yes, Hannah?
So if let's stick with the individual for a little bit longer, and then maybe we'll go back to some of the questions that are more at the organization level. So there's a question here around how can I support people in my team who have a special skill set, but perhaps feel it's not being utilized or seen, and they're afraid they aren't able to provide the most value in the cross-functional fluid structure. How can I, so it's more, I guess this sounds like it's from, I've got a team. How can I support that feeling of not being valued because of my skill set?
Yeah. Do you want me to jump in there, Eduardo?
Yeah.
I've got a live example at the moment in the team and the client that I'm working with, and I don't think it's a quick fix. I'd love to say there's a silver bullet, but I definitely think it's around coaching and having one of those conversations of what is the skill that you want to be using, and getting them to think about, well, how might you, what needs to be true of the environment, your thinking, and the emotions for you to actually lean into leveraging those skills.
Right.
Yeah, beautiful. There's another question. How might you recognize might you recognize individuals who have a traditional view of promotions as self-validation?
How do I recognize?
Yeah, how would you recognize that?
I think we can tell us very, very easily, don't you? Yeah?
Do you mean, is the question, how do you recognize it, or how do you acknowledge that and still nudge them in a different direction, like nudge them down the road of fluid and non-role?
Well, the question is how you recognize it, but I like the overlay you've put on it, Katia, because it makes it practical for anyone listening. If you're going to nudge it. I mean, I think it is quite obvious, right? Like it's like what you said before, Katia, like, where's my job title? How do I What
Yeah.
we might have this internally, but what about externally?
Yeah.
Like how to, you know, when we're butting up against a system, and I think about the classic LinkedIn thing all the time, like or like tenders and proposals, we want to hear from the directors and the senior, blah, blah, blah. It's like, but we're just doing that to conform to your structure, but actually we're so much more fluid and not like that. So there's this disconnect, and you know, like it's really interesting. Now that's at a provider level or a market level, but what about at the individual level? Well, it's probably usually that kind of, well, what's my job title? Or what do I tell my friends? Because they're all asking my role. And it's just quicker to say that rather than, oh, you know, we work for like a self-organizing fluid.
Yeah, that's right.
People are like, but I work in a government department and we need this stuff to keep us on track.
I mean, and there's an artistry and a science to it, right? So the artistry is pick your moment and use it where it makes sense, right? So what you just said then, Hannah, it makes perfect sense to do that because that's how other people are going to make sense of it. But this is why we do these sorts of webinars as well, as we're creating that movement and that starting to reshape the way people think. So you plant the seed.
I think people, we still think about career progression in that way, you know, like I want this title so I can go to the next job and get that other title and get more money and get, you know, and but I think this is changing. I think you can tell that story. I've been working in this area. I've been performing a different number of roles. I think employers are looking for more these type of people that can deal with ambiguity, that have the self-belief, that they don't need, you know, the concrete structures. More and more organizations are understanding that that's sort of the way of the future. And that's how I will be coaching my team members, if that was the question. Yeah, so this is a great skill for you to take to the future, going from a traditional career progression, step by step, junior, blah blah blah, mid, senior, you know, whatever, you know, to go, I did a great job and I developed all these skills here and they can be transferable for many others. You know, one organization that I was working with used to say, you know, your next role doesn't exist. And I love that. It's about how you claim, how you create your next role, you know, every day by taking the opportunities rather than waiting to be told, or by, you know, that structural.
Yeah, awesome. Jackie's actually summarized this, something quite
Love that.
How can you guys read the comment?
I just leant forward then and just
not meant to. But it's lovely because Jackie said it, you know, it sounds like you need to meet those hierarchical ways of thinking with non-judgment and then with a constructive challenge, which is essentially, you know, what you just said in a way, Eduardo.
And I think there's an element here, Hannah, around, and this has been a learning for me too, because I'm a very outcome driven person, and I come from a world where you need to, are you all laughing at that?
No, it's beautiful. I love it.
No, it drives me nuts. It drives me nuts. I'd love to not be as out. I mean, you know, because I'm used to, well, value is seen in the output, and there's no doubt that's true. But what I'm learning is the nuance there. There's a real nuance that not all value is in the output. And again, you know, I always use like I suppose the most recent examples is been within a client for the last 2 years working with them, and I am seeing a shift. Now, when I first went in there, I'm up against hierarchy, I'm up against the traditional org model, and none of that's really gone away. And there's a very good reason for that, but I have influenced change over time with the way they talk about work, with the way that the work is getting done, with the way people are comfortable about it not being about them. And so for me, that's the win, right? The outcome is still slower than I would like it to be. because I always want to be at the end before I've even started. But I can see progress. So I've had to reframe value. I've had to reframe what success looks like in those scenarios.
That's really awesome, Katia. And like, I'm just like, yes, 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 yes. So there was another question that came through, and I just, to build on what you were just saying, which was like, I agree on the focus of starting small and looking at your own team first.
Mm.
And then I guess the reframing you just mentioned, but the question is, any ideas for great ways to publicize what you're doing with the rest of the organization / powers that be? This person must work in a very hierarchical organization if they're using the word power.
I think so there's an organic approach where, you know, obviously people will start to notice slight differences. The way the language that you use when you're talking to other people will be notably different. And so they'll twig that. And then I suppose the more formal ways, of course, if you start with an experiment and a hypothesis, make sure that you're measuring that so that you can also speak in a language that they can understand if they're highly you know, measurement driven, if you like, because that's the organization I'm working in at the moment has very, you know, show me what the results are, show me what the numbers are. I have to speak their language.
Yeah.
I can hear it.
Let's go. Awesome. Great. Love the tips. Katia is always like gold dust for like really practical stuff to get on. She's out, which is epic. So there's a few things here around oh, what's this question? Oh yeah, sorry, I got distracted. What a terrible host. How do we, okay, what are your views on, this is more ways of working, but there's kind of there's a few questions. I'm going to bundle them together because one is like, we have to set this up for surety of process. How do we do that? Like, how do you challenge that if we're like a government department and this is the way that everything's kind of set up?
Mm-hmm.
And does it come down to, you know, the small kind of nudging that you've both kind of been talking about? And there's this information flow, like there's kind of this ways of working lens to a couple of the questions here. Like there's one here, I'm interested in your views on how to improve information flow and ways of working when an organization is by its nature hierarchical and less likely to be comfortable ditching the titles.
Yeah, and by the way, when I say ditching the titles, it's not, I'm not saying, you know, everyone should ditch the titles now. It's just
One way, yeah.
I think if they're seen as a constraint, then it's not going to help, right? But ways of working can help a lot with this, like, and we talked about it last week or last event, is about how you visualize the work, how you talk about the work, how there's more conversations, more visibility between teams that do the work. Yeah. Now we think that a structure's what gonna gives us that, and it might, but the point that I guess we're trying to make is don't make that structure fixed. You know, just allow yourself that fluidity to be changing as the work change. So put the work at the center, and then the structure will come, rather than putting the structure first and then decide what the work is.
Yep.
Now, if you are in a very hierarchical traditional organization, you're gonna have less room to change that. But if you're a leader in a team, maybe you can do that with your team. It might not apply with the other teams that you're working on, but it may apply with yours, right? Start applying, start being the change you want to see where you can. Start not being constrained by job titles. Start in your team, you know, start coaching those people about the belief, the versatility, you know, those 4 tenets that we talk about. That's where you can start applying some change. I don't know if that answers the
Well, I think that's a really great way to wrap this conversation, because it's a call to action, right? Like, and we're working with, well, a couple of clients at the moment, but I'm thinking of one in particular where we really have started within one part of the business, and that's all about making them fully agile. And that's leading on to a bunch of other change and transformation and innovation kind of work. But we had to start and then tell the story really, really consciously within the team, and this is hundreds of people. This isn't, a 10-person team. This is hundreds of people. To then communicate that out, demonstrate that to the rest of the organization, who are now going, oh, okay, there's something going on over here. And they're being really honest about what they're doing well and what they're not doing well as well. So I think that kind of comms back, but that kind of start, small, simple now,
Yes.
with a team or a department, I think we can all, take charge and not be stuck in traffic and all move fluidly around a roundabout. So that analogy seems to have resonated really well, Katia, which is epic. We love a good analogy. And I guess let's channel a bit of Ted Lasso: conditioning, versatility, awareness, and belief.
I'm curious if people were asking about how leadership
Nice.
fits with hierarchy, because that's the next topic, yeah? Is that it?
Thank you, Eduardo. The next topic.
Segue, Eduardo.
What a great segue into the next topic, which is coming up in a month, and it's on subtle leadership. Is it subtle?
It is subtle leadership,
Should
yes.
it be subtle? Who knows? But yeah, there's a few questions around, as we saw last time, about leading. And what's been quite nice about this, the questions that have been coming through, is it hasn't necessarily been about me as a leader and my team. It's more, how can I lead? So it's already sort of in the language that I'm saying. And there's a few, more traditional kind of leadership, I'm in a leadership role type questions, but it's actually feels like we're sort of talking about as a leader of, as opposed to I've got a big team.
Beautiful.
So thank you both. It was just a stunning conversation. You guys are brilliant. And
we should do more of these, Hannah. You always make me feel
more of these. And so see us for our next event on subtle leadership. There you go. The information is in the chat there. Oh, that also I think Lucas posted as well. And Sian, thank you. So thank you all very much. And we'll also curate some of the questions that we didn't quite get to and bring them into the next conversation.
awesome.
Thank you, Hannah.
Guys.
Thank you, Lucas.
Lovely to see you guys. And sorry we can't see all of you, but thanks for listening.
Beautiful. Bye.